have a job for you, but you have to build your business by Monday. Can you do it? By Monday, my business is set up and I'm starting. I did in less than a year the work that you would do in 2. You need to raise money because you can't do everything. Nobody is ever going to invest in a single person. Don't sell your time, sell the value you have and make it scalable. Financial regulation got me to fintech. Fintech got me to finance and tech. Tech got me to entrepreneurs.
You were somewhere you cannot impact, and you could go somewhere where you could impact.
I was about to try and pass an exam to become not just doctor, but professor. The only thing about Bitcoin is that the Fed rates are too low. I do my job when the company doesn't need you anymore. They can fire you, that's okay. Everyone can be a manager. As long as you know how to hold a pen, you are a manager. Hong Kong is a very expensive city to live in.
Tiger Woods, in terms of coaching, have 12 coaches.
2 businesses, 2 fails, because no business model and no team. You can go to the best schools, it doesn't mean you're going to have a job. You can't make a living as a coach.
Hello guys, it's good to have you here. So today we will do a presentation in the Scale Up Academy of Antoine, one of the associates of the project, and of course one of the people that will bring a lot of insights. And you will see he has a lot of experience, he works with a lot of people. And today I will try to present you a little Antoine, if you are okay with that, and then I will let you keep going.
Okay.
So, to begin, Antoine is a teacher. So, who says teacher says people that will learn from him. That's the first thing, because he's someone that's just really, really pedagogic. Then, Antoine is also an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur also. He has multiple companies. And actually, we are associated with the Scale Up Academy, but we are also associated in this podcast studio where we are recording that content. And on the other hand, Antoine is a business coach. So he's allowing a lot of entrepreneurs and let's say companies, because it's all the sizes, to scale their company and to allow them to go to the next level and to automatize and optimize all the process on the way. So Antoine, did I miss anything? I think we're good to go.
That's a pretty good picture. It's a kind of a weird profile, I guess. But again, you can't apologize about that. So it's okay to just go with it.
Let's go.
Where do we start?
Let's start with the beginning. How did you begin?
Everything began in Paris, but then out of Paris because it was more a question of being international for me. And I realized very fast that the way of teaching things in Paris at university is more about just shut up, learn, and repeat whatever you heard, don't think about it. Whereas back in the UK, it was more like, shh, don't speak, think. Then when you think about what you're doing, give your answer. And then move on from that. So it made the thing completely different to me, because as you said, I like teaching, and so it's important to me to have teachers who actually feel like teaching to me. So the background is very much a French guy who stopped being French at some point and moved outside, lived in London for a while, and then to Hong Kong, where I spent a few years. Arrived there as during my years in between London and Paris, I was an entrepreneur, and I started with failed businesses. We can talk about that later. And then because I was an academic with a PhD, I ended up becoming a teacher and an academic back in Hong Kong, doing law and financial regulation, which has nothing to do with the marketing and the selling and the business things I'm doing now. And then one thing to another, you don't realize it, but it gets you to podcast studio where you're actually one of the founders and you don't expect it, and it's fun.
I like it. And you said we will talk about this later, not later, now. What about those failed entrepreneurship? Because people need to know, as a Scale Up Academy, it's not all pink. There is a lot of gray and a lot of black sometimes, but it's what allows us to go forward. So go on.
So you have to pick to get the big picture on the thing. You get out of law school, you have a PhD, and that PhD is about litigation between multinational companies and states. This is what the top 5 law firms do in the world, and it pays millions. But it's the financial crisis, and the only thing they want to do is take trainees that they don't have to pay. Plain English, excuse my French, you're fucked up. You can't find a job in there. The only thing you have is an expertise. People might need it, but they don't want it. And everything you have to sell is your time. So you're screwed, whatever you do. I couldn't find that job that I wanted to do at the time, so I ended up building my first business, which is working as a consultant for the number one credit insurance company in the world. I found a guy there who was the smartest guy ever. Big head, lots of things to say, very smart. And he said, I have a job for you, but you have to build your business by Monday. Can you do it? Because I'm not hiring, I'm taking you as a consultant. By Monday, my business is set up and I'm starting. I did in less than a year the work that you would do in 2. But as soon as it stopped, it was stopped. So for a few months, you make good money. You're under 30 and you're making 2x, 3x what people do at that age. But it's not a business. It's a kind of a glorified job. And as soon as you've lost your client because the mission is done, you go from money to none. And then for another 5 months, you have to look for new clients. Reinvent everything you're doing, trying to pitch, trying to find a value proposition, everything. And you don't have anything because the first business you have is just someone who's hiring you to do a specific task, not to create value as such, right? So the first business is the business without a business model, without a pitch, without a value proposition. It works as long as it lasts, but then as soon as it finishes, it's the end. First fail, no business model. Then I realized I had an entrepreneur kind of mindset and I wanted to do stuff. So I looked around and I ended up working on the beginning of an app, which at the time was something close to Pinterest, but Pinterest was not really there yet. So it's very far from the Pinterest we know now, but it was a great idea. I still think about that. The problem was I was on my own, and because you're on your own, you have, again, no chances at all. Because you might have some skills, but you don't have all of them. You need to raise money because you can't do everything, but nobody is ever going to invest in a single person because there is no team. So let's say you meet a boss or whatever, that's the end of it, no value. So that second business project didn't have a business model either, but it didn't have a team. 2 businesses, 2 failed because no business model and no team. That was the first lesson.
Great. And then, if I put it chronologically, you went to Hong Kong.
And then I went to Hong Kong because as part of my PhD, I worked here and then, and it got me to a trip in Hong Kong. And there my boss, who became my boss, tried to hire me a few times, and I said, no. And then he called and he said, you know what, I'm going to ask a third time. It's the last one, so you take it or you leave it. And we didn't have, anything better to do in Paris at the time. But we had that chance to go and try a trip, try to live for a few years in Hong Kong, and we did it. So it was beginning of the summer. 2 months after that, we were we were actually in Hong Kong and trying a new life. It was as an academic. The point was to be a researcher and work on financial regulation, which has nothing to do with the entrepreneurship. It was more like going back to the expertise I had and doing something that I could do with the time I had and selling my time to a university because they were paying a salary, basically. So that became a new routine.
Okay, that's great. So you had the experience to go into entrepreneurship in a failed way.
Yeah.
You came back into, I would say, employee's way.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then I had to change. I realized, so there were 2 things, two big factors. One was I realized that I could do a lot with my time and that the academic way of doing things was way too slow for me. So I realized that the time I was putting in there was not worth the money I was making in the end. And so it was my first big lesson in entrepreneurship, which is don't sell your time. Sell the value you have and make it scalable.
Thanks, no thanks. You go forward.
Yes, exactly. The second thing was I was working in financial regulation. Financial regulation got me to fintech. Fintech got me to finance and tech. Tech got me to entrepreneurs. And I realized that I was a lot more interested in the entrepreneurial side of things than in anything else. So it gave me a way to say, hey, you know what, you're not in the right place. The click I had was that moment was when the Bitcoin was going from 10K to 20, 30, out of the screen kind of K. And at that time, I was at a stage at the university where I was about to try and pass an exam to become professor, not just doctor, but professor. And so I had to give a class. And I did it on the Bitcoin and the cryptos. And I tried to explain that would become a regulatory topic, that the governments would start looking at that, and that this would be something interesting for a law school where I was working. And the feedback I had was, you know what, the only thing about Bitcoin is that the Fed rates are too low and you don't know your job. You're an incompetent. And when I listened to that professor who told me that, I was like, so you're telling me that you know about cryptos, but you don't know about your clients, because the clients of the crypto system are not people who know about the Fed rates. They don't give a shit about that. What are you talking about? This is not the point. It was time to do something else. So when you end up in front of a wall like that, where you see things and you realize it's not the right time, it's not the right place to do it, and at the same time you realize it shouldn't be a question of time, it should be a question of creating value, then it's time to move on to the thing that creates value.
So in the end, what got you this click is things that you were somewhere you cannot impact, and you could go somewhere where you could impact.
So there were two things. There was meeting someone, and there was having the electroshock and starting the personal journey that you were talking about in the other video, that is at the core of what entrepreneurs should be doing. The meeting someone was basically you realize that you're not fit for that academic market. So if there is no product market fit, basically you look somewhere else. And I was looking at the entrepreneurial network back there in Hong Kong, and I met a guy who was a business coach. And the first thing he did was making me so uncomfortable. I was like, who the hell is that guy? And he just plugged my fingers into the wall, and I was like, too uncomfortable. But you give a chance to the product, right? So I kept having lunch and having discussions, and I realized that guy was already looking at whatever ideas I had, but he was way further than me already. The idea was in my head, he was further than me. And then he asked me a question and he said, what are you waiting for? What do you mean? It's not me. I'm working in that context and people are not moving. There is nothing I can do, right? And he said, what are you looking for? What are you waiting for? Well, again, I'm telling you, it's not me, it's the context. What are you waiting for? And he kept asking that stupid question for months. And for months, I kept complaining about it because it wasn't me. And then at some point, I had a click. And I realized that what he wasn't saying was, why don't you quit and do something else with your time? Because again, it's a question of time. So that was the big click. The second thing was, at the time, basically the university needed to build a leadership project to teach professors how to think in terms of impact. So they get money from research. Instead of saying, here is the money, what do you do with it? I publish, okay, and then I write something else with more money. It was a question of saying, okay, think in terms of value proposition. You publish something, who is going to use it? Do you have a client? Is anyone ever going to use your research? What is the impact you're making? And doing that was a way to train teachers, academic professors who get paid a lot and have crazy expertise, to help them to pitch something that's everything people do in real life, in the real world, when they have to sell something. The reality is, when I left, the typical, in that school anyway, the typical duration to get a financial proposition validated for academic research was 3 years, which means 3 fails, right?
Okay.
1 every year. You can try once a year. And the average project was about 30K, right? I reshuffled the card. And when we started rephrasing, instead of talking about paradigm shifts and words like that academics love to use that mean nothing to everyone else, and we started talking about change, transformation, impact, what research is really making in terms of changing the lives of people, we pushed 10 projects The 10 projects got accepted in 6 months. All of them 100% success, and we raised $1.5 million, a bit under that, US dollars.
Amazing.
In 6 months. Instead of the 300 we would have maybe gotten in 3 years.
Yeah.
That was the end of it. But to me, it was the click. As in, just because you're now being an academic and complaining about not doing anything with your time, doesn't mean you can't just say, okay, thank you for the experience, but now I'll be okay on my own. Goodbye. And you can turn an academic experience where people feel like money is toxic and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about clients. They don't want to talk about products. They don't want to talk about market. They don't want to sell whatever, because it's like, nah, you can't do that. Still, you can just change the words, think in terms of value proposition, think in terms of pitch, and you can talk to a very different public and do the exact same thing, which is shake them up to make them come up with something that people are going to want to hear. And at the same time, I had that guy, Philippe, who was, why don't you join me? Because now that you realize that you can do something else, you can join me. And the story is, he was leaving Hong Kong. I was still there, so we started to team up. And I became a business coach.
Amazing. And what is for you the feedback you could give when you began, at the beginning, when you began to be business coach? How did you felt it?
It was the most scary thing ever. Because when you come from a world where your job is to assess, give insights, and the next day your job is to look at people in the eye and tell them that maybe they should be doing something different. You go from things that are cold, very straight, very neutral, to something that becomes immediately emotional, because the guy in front of you is not going to like what you say. And so the first thing you have to learn is get some guts. The first clients I had, some of the first clients I had anyway, they were very strong in terms of character. And you would say something, they would be like, yeah, I didn't wait for you to try that. And it's very destabilizing, because you're like, okay, what do I do next? And it takes some time to say, okay, you tried, but did it work? No. So did you try hard enough? No. Did you try something else? No. What are you waiting for? When do you do it? So you go from having a job that pays for your time, whatever the amount of time you have to spend, and doesn't pay you for having guts, to getting into a job where you have to find clients, you have to sell something, and once you find client, you have to keep pushing them. Even though they don't want necessarily to be pushed, that's why they pay you, but it doesn't mean they actually want to be pushed that far. And when you realize that you're pushing, you have to keep pushing. And if these people say, hey, wait, you're going too far, you have to say, no, I'm not done, I keep pushing. And that is the personal transformation that you have to go through. That's the most difficult thing.
Amazing. And I know you not from before, so I know the person you are, and I can say, okay, your transformation is amazing when I hear the story of what you were and the vision you had before. So it's really interesting to hear that also, because there is few parts I didn't know, and I like that. So my question now will be, what kind of customers, what kind of people did you accompany, did you coached to help them to get better and get to a next level into their companies?
The first people I coached were solopreneurs.
Okay.
They had an idea, they had something in mind, but they weren't too sure about how to start. And when you start a project, that's the issue. I was saying earlier, I started things, I was on my own. There was no value because there was no team. And investors want to invest in a business that has a team, because first, if anything happens to one guy, there are more people who can keep going, right? But when it's just you and it's me, myself, and I, then we might be several people in my head, different problem, but it's still in my head, right? As soon as you start having someone in front of you who says, did you think about that? Have you tried this? You have to question the way you're going to build things. You have to question the way you build your business. Why this way? Why that way? And these solopreneurs that I worked with, they were at that stage. They were starting up, but they were starting without realizing it to scale up. Mm-hmm. Because their point was, I'm not trying to do something for now, me. I'm trying to build something that I can grow as a business that's going to work for me as soon as possible. So they were the first ones. It's an easy way to start that job because you don't get pushed too far as the coach, and you have people in front of you who are comfortable, but they're not going to push back and all that. And then progressively, you end up working with people that are, in teams. You work with the boss, and the boss says, okay, now that I understand what you mean, you help me save time. For instance, one of my first clients said the result after a year of using business coaching was going from him as the CEO being one developer in the team to saying, I shaved 3 months off work every year because I stopped doing developing code, right? He used that time differently. Now he doesn't touch a line of code anymore, and he is the CEO of the company, and he is busy with raising funds and managing the company. That's a completely different career. But the switch was there. He had to go from I'm selling my time and selling my expertise to I'm scaling things up. I'm building the organization so that the organization can work without me and for my partners. But once he got that, he said, you know what? Now you have to explain that to my partners. And so it starts with, you start with the boss, and then the boss gets the idea, and you start working with more people in the team. And progressively, you get to work with managers. And the issue with managers is everyone can be a manager. As long as you know how to hold a pen, you are a manager of some sort, right? The key in a company that needs to scale up to become an asset that can work without you is not to have managers, is to have team leaders. And as soon as you can make people realize that their job is not to be a manager, is to be the lead, then you change everything because they are going to take the lead. They are going to transform the team. They are going to transform the organization. They are going to ask people, why do you do it like that? It doesn't work for me. And so when you start pushing that kind of logic, you transform the company and the organization from the inside. So to come back to the question, it started from people who work on their own but want to build something for the next years. And it grew progressively to bigger companies and people who say, you know what, I've got a company, but I'm working for my company now. And what I want is that company to work for me. What they don't say is, I want to be redundant in my own company, which is where I provoke and I say, my job is to make you redundant. I do my job when the company doesn't need you anymore. They can fire you, that's okay. That means you've done your job. So that's the kind of company we work with typically. Typically, it's a few million in turnover, a team of 10 plus, and it goes to companies that do 100 million and can have 50, 60, 70 people in the team. Recently, we've been working also with big banks. They are not our typical customer because they're not entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And we can elaborate on that later, but the entrepreneurial mindset is something that we believe in very deeply. But some people in banks realize that banks are big organizations with small teams. And as soon as the team leaders, not managers, but leaders, they decide that they're going to challenge the team, then it means we can do things with them. Because it becomes a human kind of size, and it means we can play with people, because it's about playing in the end.
Amazing.
So it's kind of varied. Changes with time, that's the point.
I like it. And I like because one time I got the idea, let's say the story of Tiger Woods, who is a well-known golfer. And he gave, the person that told me this story gave the example of Tiger Woods because Tiger Woods, in terms of coaching, have 12 coaches that are there to tell him, okay, I look at this and I will tell you if this is wrong. The other one, I look at this and I will tell you if this is wrong. So then the coach says, look, this is wrong, change that. This is wrong, change that. And he's who he is because of that. So to me, business coaching is really allowing you to see as a person, as an entrepreneur, whatever, the field, allowing you to see what you don't see and what you hide yourself.
It's a question of we all have blind spots. And the problem with blind spots is they are blind spots. There are things that you don't know.
Exactly.
And if you want to take a picture, you put your hands behind your ear, and every time you move your head, you're not going to see your hands. Now the hands are your problems. You can move your head, you're not going to see them. So the point of having someone who's working with you and challenging you and provoking you, and always with a smile, but can be nasty, their job is to put your hands in front of your eyes, and then you decide. If you decide to ignore them, that's your problem, but you can't say you don't know. If you decide to do something with it, then they're part of the known area that you have, and then you can affect that. The big thing is that what we did with Philippe Bonnet, my partner at Impactive, is that we started as business coaches. And progressively, what was something that was about Philippe and his brand, because he was alone, and then Philippe plus me turned into a team. And we built a brand around that, because in the end, it's about the people and the brand and the product. That got more coaches to come to us. And they said, you know what, it's too difficult to do it on my own. Can I join your brand? Can I use your brand? So we had to change a lot of things to make it viable and to make sure they could just fit in our system, or that our system, the other way around, could adapt to them. What we realized is that the US way of seeing the coach is not the same way as the one you would have necessarily anywhere else. When you see a sports coach, you are expecting someone who's going to push you. You try to do whatever workout, you want to die on the floor, and your trainer is going to be like, no, you do 2 more. I'll help. But you do 2 more. Keep going. Keep going. I'm not letting you down. That's what the coach is about. It's about saying, keep going. Do it now. The problem with this is that the way a coach is trained is you're here to ask a question, not give an opinion. So let's take that picture again. You're trying to do a workout, and now you have a trainer who says, do you think you could do 1 more? It doesn't work. What people want is someone to say, do 1 more. I'm not giving you a choice, do 1 more. Think about that. Try something else. Do it. And that's not what the training of a coach is about. In the US, any CEO, big companies, they have coach. Communication coach, business coach, someone who's there to provoke them, challenge them, make them think differently about what they're doing every day. And that's more like a rugby coach. This is not the logic that you see everywhere. So it made us transform the system, and it made us realize that in the end what we do is growth facilitation, business facilitation, scale-up facilitation. And we talk about ourselves as scale-up facilitators more than business coaches now, because anyone can be a business coach. You just have to say you're doing it. Can you charge for it? No. Can you charge with 3-4 zeros for it? No. Not to a single client, certainly not. Not if you don't have a way to show that you're actually going to provoke and create value. So in the end, the whole challenge is to make sure that you're not falling in the trap of saying, I have a coach, it's okay. No. You can have a coach if the coach is just asking you how you're doing, and if you've considered doing something else, you're not going to go anywhere. You need to work with someone who's going to push you, who's going to provoke you, and who's going to get you to the next step. That's super important. That's part of the mix between I have a business, but to run that business, it has to be me developing myself, scaling myself up, pushing my own mindset. That has to be a pair.
Okay, so now you have the ability to charge high tickets because you can prove you will bring value. And because you bring value, those customers stays with you and you keep getting that high ticket, right?
It's another issue that we've got rid of. The logic when you get trained as a coach is you shouldn't, alienate your clients. You are here to help solve a problem, not solve a problem, help solve a problem with questions. And as soon as that problem is gone, you have to step back and let them go back to their lives, right? As if there was a string around their neck and you were trying to hang them up.
Yeah.
The problem is you can't make a living as a coach just with that because it takes time to find a client. And if on top of that, you're not allowed to keep that client, where do you go? Plus, if you're a business coach, you know that a business model should be about getting clients, keeping them, and creating more value to keep selling stuff. So it doesn't make any sense to call yourself a business coach and not doing that. As soon as you say, I accept that I'm not the typical coach because I'm not just a coach. As soon as you say, yes, I can coach people, but I can also mentor them, I can provoke them, I can kick their ass if I have to, and I can transform their business, then the value you create means that these people are going to keep working with you for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And this is what we do. It means you now have a business model that's different because you have a retainer. It keeps going. You can keep developing your business because obviously you have an income. You have cash flow that comes in that allows you to invest not in just yourself, but in a team and blah, 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 which is basically the concept of scaling a business.
So you put the example of yourself to allow your customer to do the same.
Of course, because otherwise it makes no sense. And that's why people say, hey, you know what? You're expensive for that.
Yeah, I know. That's the answer you gave. So, no, thank you. It's really, really interesting. And how did you got to come to Lisbon to change your life again? Because you went to Hong Kong, now you are in Lisbon. We launched together this podcast studio with few associates, friends and associates. What made the change?
Family. Family and time. I talk a lot about time because I strongly believe you shouldn't be selling your time. Family was very simple. We had a baby at the time. We still have the baby now. But the baby was 1 year old, and you do a birthday on a big TV screen to have the family, and the baby is happy because that's everything he knows. But deep down, you know that something is wrong, and being 13, 14 hours away from family isn't working. So we just gave ourselves a year, and we said next year for the second birthday, we have to be closer to family. So we moved. We decided to move for that first reason. The second thing was Hong Kong is a very expensive city to live in. And so when you can basically make a living charging on only a limited amount of hours, then you have a family, your costs increase. So you get to a point where you have to decide, do I want to keep working more just to pay more bills, which is more time, and you keep selling your time? Or do I want to live somewhere where I can enjoy my time and stop running after just money?
And that's people maybe need to know, it's that in Portugal you have a cost of living that is really attractive for the same work you do on other countries and the same billing you have on the other countries. Here you will live like a prince.
And there is a very different mindset back in Hong Kong. People wake up early in the morning, they come back home very late at night, they go to work during the day, and then they go to after work events, 1, 2, 3 sometimes. And it's just work, speed. That's a very fast city. Here, Portugal, you take the time. You have the time. Things take longer, but that's okay because in the end, your lifestyle is changing. And we wanted to have that different lifestyle. We didn't want to go back to France because at some point when you live abroad, it's too difficult to go back to the old styles and what everyone else is doing. And we had a business that was international. And Philippe being in France, it was making no real sense for me to go back to France as well. So we had a partner in Sam in Hong Kong who was taking my seat. Philippe was in France. It was making sense to look for another place to be and just settle in a new country. So we looked for a place with some sun, not too much, some sea. That was the case. Good food, time. We ended up here.
Yeah, and good people.
And good people.
That's what we see here in Portugal. I will have one more question. That question will be more, how did you took the ideas, decisions, the thought about getting into that scale-up academy thing together?
So the vision behind Impactive, so the network that I'm a co-founder of, that's about connecting the growth and the scale-up facilitators who can do coaching, but not just that, to CEOs and companies that want to grow and scale up. This is what we do now. But the original plan was not that. The initial idea that we had was to say, okay, there are more and more entrepreneurs. The social contract is changing. It used to be a matter of, you know what, son, go to school, you'll get a good job. Once you get a good job, you can get a mortgage, and then you can get a house and a dog and a family, and everything's going to be fine. And then you're going to stay for 40 years in that company, security. And then you can go on retirement because the government is going to pay for your retirement. The reality is today, if you're somewhere under 50, you're screwed. The social contract has changed. You can go to the best schools. It doesn't mean you're going to have a job. If you have a job, it doesn't mean you're not going to get fired. It doesn't mean you can get a mortgage for buying a home. And whatever happens, you're going to be fired at some point because you're too old and too expensive. So you're never going to get anything durable in the long term. Plus, the situation being what it is, you're never going to get retirement either.
Exactly.
So now you have a lot of people who say, you know what, screw the system. I don't want to get screwed. I'll build my own business and I'm going to depend on myself. The issue with that is you don't have education for it. You have less than 10 people who are business owners who actually had a training, business training of whatever sort. That's less than 1 on 10. That's very little. But still, these people, they need to have some background as to, okay, I'm an expert on something, but not an expert on running a business. So I have what I know how to do, but running a business and moving it ahead and developing it is not part of my skills because I never learned how to do it. So when we started and I joined Philippe, I said, you know what, my point is not to become a coach who's going to spend his life coaching. I want to turn that into a business that's going to work for us the same way you're teaching it to the clients, right? And so we started thinking, okay, who can we serve? Who could be the new client that we don't have and who is not going to buy our time? And so we started building Impactive as a brand that was about providing the coaching to 5% of the clients and the self-coaching to the 95% of the remaining clients who can't afford to pay a high ticket for a coach. And they just want to start on their own and they want to learn on their own, right? So we started doing that. And the point was to make the content and the tools and the education available to people online. But as I said before, because we did things somehow right with the brand, some coaches came to us and said, hey, can we join the brand? So we had to switch the business model to adapt to the market. The market was saying, okay, wait, don't do the digital now. Focus on the people who are here and build a brand for coaches. So we stopped doing the digital side of things and we moved to building a network that helps people who want to coach to do it right with the right tools, everything they need to do their job, which is coaching. So that meant the whole self-coaching thing was on the side. And it was a shame because in the end, we drive traffic to the website. We have people who want to do what they do and they just want to have a scope. So when we started talking about the Scale Up Academy, it was again about the team and the people. On my own, I was in charge of building the content. I didn't have time to build the content for the team, plus the content for the people, online people, digital people, plus the marketing of it. You can't do everything and you have to focus. Teaming up means we can use that content that we have. We can repurpose it, we can shape it differently, and now we can market it because we have the expertise to do it with the team. So that Scale Up Academy is a way to push that vision that we had in the first place, make it real, not just something on the side, it's there, but it's like the Christmas tree at the back, it's there, but the point is not there. And it's a real opportunity to say, okay, there is a market, a growing market with entrepreneurs everywhere. They want to build businesses for themselves. They don't want to just wait for someone else to do the job for them. They want to move and they want to move now. So how do we provide that kind of thing? There is a market in education. So that's what this Scale Up Academy is about. It's about saying scaling up is something you get if you start thinking about it. It's like law. People say, you know what, do law, my son. It can get you anywhere. Yes, as soon as you stop trying to be a lawyer. That's the same. You can scale up as soon as you start thinking that you can do it. So instead of starting up, just go for it. Think about how you can scale it. Now you have the content.
So we will help the people to self-coach themselves
Yeah.
and to be able to scale their company? and
Well,
their
I would
business?
say facilitate their own development, if you don't mind. But yes, that's
Let's go
the
for it.
idea. That's the idea for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Antoine.
Thank you.
It was really insightful, and I'm really glad we had this first exchange, allowing the people to discover us, and we'll see what we can bring them on the next video.
Yeah, we'll see you on the Scale Up Academy for sure.
Yeah, thank you guys. We stay update. Like the video if you enjoyed what was shared. Say a comment and say what you thought about the experience of Antoine and his feedback about his life. And feel free also to share to bring the algorithm to a next level. Thank you guys, and we stay connected.
Cheers.